So this is breakout room C, which is talking about R, responsibility. So there are three sort of subheadings under that high-level principle. You can find them in the collaborative notes document. I'll also put in chat here. Here we go. Paste. And Maui also posted a picture, a slide. Sadly, it's a bit hard to read unless you can enlarge it, with a few possible indicators for each of those headings. So I was intrigued. Do you have any ideas about possible indicators for R1, for positive relationships? What are sort of ways you could assess whether the data is indeed enabling positive relationships? Any views? So I see we have 4 participants here, probably. Gilles Boulot, is that, from CNRS? And Hannah Foley from Juno. So Hannah is then probably one of the admins for the system. And Joanna Yannick from CNRS. And Raymond Lovett from ANU, from the Australian National University. So Raymond, can you hear me? Or Joanna, can you hear me? You can also type something in chat if you prefer. Or Gilles, can you hear me? I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if I got it wrong. So to try and raise that question is sort of, when we're talking about how can data enable those positive relationships, how can Indigenous data enable those positive relationships? So what the care principles write is that the data is actually inviolable unless linked to relationships built on respect, reciprocity, trust, and mutual understanding, as defined by the Indigenous people to whom those data relate. So what would be possible ways of identifying that, and so putting an indicator against that? So when you're working with a researcher at the point of creating data, how do they ensure that they, in that data creation process, actually you build that upon relationships built on respect, trust, and mutual understanding. So I don't know if you have any views. Is there a way we could assess that? Is there a way we could ask the researcher to provide evidence for that? Maybe in the stage of developing a data management plan. Requiring that there is some consultation in the development of proposal and the process. And further down the track, they talk about those working with Indigenous data are responsible for ensuring that the creation, interpretation, and use of those data uphold or even are respectful of the dignity of Indigenous nations and communities. So it's not just at the point of creation of the data, but also at the point of use of the data, making sure that that data is used in such a way that it is respectful and that it is doesn't break that respect, and that it is done in a dignified way in consultation with Indigenous nations and communities. So that might be a possible indicator in that space. So in your work and in your role that you currently have, is this something that would be relevant to you? Is this something that you're that you feel that you could, that researchers will be working with? Is this a consideration that you would be confronted with in your daily life? How is that for CNRS? Are there Indigenous nations and people in France or maybe in the French territories that would be for whom this is relevant, and where data is being pulled in and being brought together and archived at CNRS? So the next indicator is R2. That's on expanding capability and capacity. And there it's about invoking a reciprocal responsibility to enhance data literacy within Indigenous communities. So there it's also about providing something back and growing that local community, that Indigenous community. So I think there is a question, where would you put that request to the researcher? Is that something that you request at the initial stage of developing a research project? Is it at the stage of writing a data management plan? Is this at the point of communication of research outcomes and results? When you deliver a data set at the end, is this an element that you would pass on and you would invest time and effort in alongside the data publication and production? These are possible places where you could require of a researcher that they actually also invest some effort into expanding the capability and capacity within the Indigenous people. And the final final sub-principle or principle there is for Indigenous languages and world views. So there they say resources must be provided to generate data grounded in the language's worldviews and lived experiences, including values and principles of Indigenous people. So there, I think it's about I suppose we could consider indicators that address the language and worldviews and lived experiences that the data conveys, and does the data sufficiently convey that? Does that take that into account? Does it provide a view of the richness of the relevant languages? Does it reflect that? So I think these are possible indicators that could be built upon these. So I hope that thinking that way is probably a slightly more useful way of untangling what the different perspectives are. I will see what's happening in the other groups. If you scroll up in the, I'll put a note, the address of the collaborative notes document in the chat. Here we go. If you go into that, follow that link and you go into the chat, there you will see in breakout. In the first one, breakout A, collective benefit, they've added some links. Partnership subgroup of the IPCC. In the authority to control, there's headings there about recognizing rights and interests, data for governance, and governance of data. And in the ethics group, they're untangling a few issues about policies, and it's both a policy and a technical issue. Okay, well, thank you for your time. I will go back now to the main room because I think it's time is coming to a close now, and look forward to seeing you back in the main room. Thank you.